bracelet, you'll need a strand of beads, and this strand is a little more than 7 inches long. And you'll want to make sure you have at least 7 inches of beads because that's how long a bracelet typically is. These are metal beads with a nice little gold and patina finish, and most of them are 8 millimeters or 10 millimeters. We're going to put this bracelet together on bead stringing wire. It says that right here on the package. You'll want to look for that. And we like 19 strand. That's the size of the wire itself. We chose a gold color because all of our fittings and beads are all gold. We're going to use a lobster clasp in gold and a jump ring to be the other end of the bracelet. And to finish the ends, we've got 2 clamshell bead tips in gold and 2 crimp beads. These are size number 1. This is what a little jar of crimp beads looks like. Those are also gold. For tools, we've got chain nose pliers and wire cutters, and then we're also going to use a ruler. We found this strand of beads at a craft store, and we just thought it was perfect the way it was, as it could be a perfect bracelet. It's about 7 inches long, which is just the right size for a bracelet, and the beads look so great the way they are. The designers have already done the work for us, and it's just temporarily strung on this filament. So we're going to cut the beads off of the filament, but keep them in this order, and I'll show you how you can turn a bead strand like this into a bracelet. So I've just cut the filament, and I'm going to gently slide it out from those beads. So now they're loose, but they're still in the right order. So the first thing you want to do to make the bracelet is cut a piece of bead stringing wire. We cut a piece about 10 inches long, which is the right length for a 7-inch bracelet. And then before we feed the beads on, we want to put a stopper at one end so the beads won't come off while we're trying to bead the bracelet. This is a bead bug, which is kind of a spring that you can crimp onto the end of your wire. You could also fold a piece of masking tape over, and that acts as a stopper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed the beads onto our bead stringing wire just in the order that they were on the strand because we thought that was so pretty. But I am going to make one design change. This is the first bead that would go on, and it would be next to our clasp. And it's kind of a big bead to be next to a clasp. It also has a large opening, and the end might come right through. So I'm going to save this bead for another project, and I'm going to skip to the second bead. And bead stringing projects are exactly how they sound. You just take beads and you string them. And often the hardest part of making a bead stringing project is deciding what order to put the beads on and picking out your beads. So how wonderful to find a strand that looks so good, we can just put it on in the same order with the same beads that some very smart designer with a great eye put together for us on a bead strand. This has happened many times when we've been shopping and see a bead strand. We think, oh, it's just perfect the way it is. So if that's ever happened to you, this is how you're going to take that bead strand and turn that into a bracelet. And if you wanted to make a necklace, you would just want to buy more beads. Buy 2 strands or 3 strands, depending on how long you want your necklace to be. And then you can do the same thing to string it. You'll cut a longer piece of bead stringing wire and just feed on the beads. I'm going to take a break here and measure our beads. We want this bracelet to be 7 inches when we're done, and that is going to include our clasp. So I'm going to slide down on the ruler, and we're right at the 6-inch mark. Clasp will take up about ½ an inch. So I think we have room to put on a few more beads. So I'm going to put on 2 more beads like that. And I'm going to measure one more time. With the clasp, we'll say the clasp is here to here. That's almost 7. That's perfect. And we can save these beautiful beads for another project and finish the ends. We have all our beads on the bead stringing wire, and now we're ready to finish the ends. And to do that, we're going to slide the beads towards the bead bug. That's our little stopper at one end. And then we're going to come out to our other end of the wire. The first thing we want to do is feed on the clamshell bead tip. And a clamshell bead tip is like a little metal clam with a loop that we're going to put our clasp in, and it has this hole in the bottom that I've just fed our bead string and wire up through. We're just going to slide that on. Then we're going to slide on a crimp bead. A crimp bead is a small metal tube that's meant to be crimped or flattened on your wire. And so I'm going to slide that onto the wire, and then I'm going to press it flat, press it closed with my chain nose pliers. And what it does is it stays on the wire, so I'm kind of pushing on it and it doesn't budge. That's what we want. Then we're going to trim the wire with our wire cutters. We don't need that little excess piece of wire. And now, this is kind of the magic of the clamshell bead tip. We slide it up over that crimp and we close it over the crimp gently, because it's metal and we don't want to dent it. I gently close it, and it ends up looking like a little bead out here at the end. Now we've got a little open loop on this one, and I can just feed our lobster clasp into that open loop. If your clamshell bead tip has a closed loop, you can use a jump ring there. I'm going to close that loop up, and now our clasp is on one end. It's pretty easy. We're going to repeat that at the other end. So to do that, I'm going to slide the beads down to that lobster clasp end. I'm going to remove my bead bug, and I'm going to put those same parts on in the same order. I've got my clamshell bead tip, and I've got my crimp bead. I like to hold the crimp bead with my chain nose pliers, because otherwise my fingers get in the way with such a small little crimp bead. And I'm going to feed that onto the wire. So now we've got the crimp bead on. Last time we crimped it right out here at the end, but if we did that now, we would have a lot of slack in our bracelet. What we need to do is slide the clamshell bead tip and the crimp bead all the way down. All the beads are slid down. There's no slack in the bracelet. So with the clamshell pushed all the way down to the beads, the crimp bead's in there, and it's pushed all the way down. I'm going to reach in with my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to press that closed, the little crimp bead, inside the clamshell bead tip. And then I'm going to press the clamshell bead tip closed, like that. Looks just like a little bead there. And then I need to trim my wire. Usually I trim the wire before I close the clamshell bead tip, but if you forget like I did, you can trim it right now. And then the last thing we want to do is feed the other end of our clasp onto that little loop on the clamshell bead tip. And this is just a jump ring. And we can close that loop like that and make sure that's secure and it looks great. And then I can just fasten my little lobster clasp right onto the jump ring. And that's how you turn a bead strand into a gorgeous bracelet.